In a small, quiet town surrounded by rolling hills and dense forests, Lieutenant Sarah Ace Callahan stood out. She wasn't just another soldier. She was one of the few female K-9 handlers in her military unit. Her reputation for being sharp, focused, and fearless had earned her respect among her fellow soldiers. But outside the walls of her base, things were different. People often doubted her abilities because of her gender, assuming that handling powerful dogs required brute strength rather than skill and trust. Sarah didn't let those opinions bother her. She knew what she was capable of, and so did her two loyal partners, Titan and Echo. Titan and Echo weren't ordinary dogs. They were highly trained German shepherds, bred and raised for military service. Their sleek coats gleamed under the sunlight, and their piercing eyes reflected intelligence and discipline. Over months of rigorous training, Sarah had built an unbreakable bond with them. Together, they could navigate treacherous terrains, detect hidden threats, and execute commands with precision. To Sarah, they weren't just working animals, they were family. One sunny afternoon, Sarah decided to take Titan and Echo to an open field on the outskirts of town for some routine training exercises. The location was perfect. It offered plenty of space, minimal distractions, and a chance for the dogs to practice their agility skills. As Sarah set up obstacle courses using cones and wooden barriers, Titan trotted alongside her, his tail wagging slightly. Echo sat nearby, watching intently as if ready to spring into action at any moment. The tranquility of the afternoon was shattered when a loud rumble echoed through the air. At first, Sarah thought it might be thunder, but then she saw them, a group of bikers roaring down the dirt road that bordered the field. There were 6 of them, all dressed in leather jackets adorned with patches and insignias. Their motorcycles kicked up clouds of dust as they skidded to a stop near the edge of the field. The leader of the group, a burly man with a scruffy beard and sunglasses perched atop his head, stepped forward. His name was Razor, and he carried himself with an air of arrogance that made Sarah's instincts flare. Razor leaned against his bike, arms crossed, and smirked as he watched Sarah and her dogs. "Well, well," he called out, his voice dripping with mockery. "What do we have here? A little lady playing with big dogs?" His comment drew laughter from his gang, who exchanged amused glances. One of them even whistled loudly, clearly trying to provoke a reaction. Sarah ignored the noise, keeping her focus on Titan and Echo. She gave them a quick hand signal, instructing them to stay calm and alert. Both dogs obeyed instantly, their ears pricking up as they scanned the area. Inside, however, Sarah felt a flicker of irritation. She was used to people questioning her abilities, but these bikers seemed determined to push her buttons. "Hey, sweetheart," Razor shouted again, stepping closer. "You sure those mutts can handle themselves? Looks like they'd run off with their tails between their legs if someone scared them." This time, Sarah turned to face him. Her expression was calm, but there was a steely determination in her eyes. "These mutts, as you call them, are highly trained military dogs," she said firmly. "They've saved lives and completed missions most people couldn't dream of, so maybe show a little respect." Her response only fueled Razor's amusement. He chuckled, shaking his head. "Respect? For a couple of overgrown puppies? I'll believe it when I see it." His friends laughed again, egging him on. One of them revved his motorcycle engine, causing Titan and Echo to flinch momentarily before regaining their composure. Sarah clenched her jaw, but refused to rise to the bait. Instead, she knelt beside Titan and Echo, speaking softly to reassure them. "It's okay, boys," she murmured, running a hand over their heads. "We're not letting anyone rattle us today." Despite her outward calm, she couldn't help but notice how the bikers lingered, their presence growing more intrusive by the minute. As the sun began to dip lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the field, Sarah decided to wrap up the session early. She guided Titan and Echo through a final round of commands, ensuring they remained disciplined despite the distractions. When she finally called them back to her side, Razor approached once more, this time with a sly grin. "You know," he said, leaning down slightly, as if addressing the dogs directly, "if you ever get tired of taking orders from her, you can always join my crew. We treat our animals real nice." His tone was patronizing and his gang erupted into laughter behind him. Sarah straightened, meeting Razor's gaze with unwavering confidence. "My dogs don't need your approval," she replied coolly. "And neither do I." With that, she turned and walked away, Titan and Echo following obediently at her heels. The biker's laughter faded into the distance as she disappeared down the trail leading back to the base. But deep down, Sarah knew this encounter wasn't over. Razor and his gang had planted a seed of conflict, and she suspected they wouldn't leave her alone anytime soon. Still, she wasn't worried. If anything, their mockery only strengthened her resolve. She had faced tougher challenges before, and she would face this one too, with Titan and Echo by her side. Over the next few days, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that Razor and his gang were keeping a close eye on her. It wasn't paranoia. She noticed them more frequently than usual, their motorcycles rumbling through the streets of the small town or idling near the edges of the training grounds where she worked with Titan and Echo. At first it seemed like harmless curiosity, but soon their behavior grew increasingly disruptive. They weren't just watching anymore, they were actively trying to interfere. One morning, as Sarah led Titan and Echo through an agility course in the same field where they'd first encountered the bikers, the sound of revving engines shattered the peaceful atmosphere. Razor and his crew appeared without warning, circling the perimeter of the field on their bikes. The noise was deafening, and the vibrations from their engines sent tremors through the ground. Titan's ears flattened against his head, and Echo growled low in his throat, both dogs clearly unsettled by the sudden intrusion. Sarah raised a hand to shield her eyes from the dust clouds kicked up by the spinning tires. "What do you want?" she called out, her voice cutting through the chaos. Razor smirked, leaning back on his bike as if he owned the place. "Just enjoying the view," he replied, gesturing vaguely toward Sarah and her dogs. His friends snickered, exchanging amused glances. One of them tossed an empty beer can into the field, letting it clatter noisily against the makeshift obstacles Sarah had set up. Another threw a half-eaten sandwich wrapper, aiming it directly at Titan and Echo. The dogs instinctively flinched, but remained rooted in position, their training overriding their initial reaction. Sarah clenched her fists, but forced herself to stay calm. Losing her temper wouldn't solve anything. It would only give the bikers exactly what they wanted, a reaction. Instead, she focused on her dogs, issuing firm commands to keep them steady. "Stay," she said sharply, her tone leaving no room for argument. Titan and Echo responded instantly, sitting upright and locking their gaze on her. Despite the distractions, they didn't budge. The bikers seemed disappointed by their lack of success. Razor frowned, scratching his chin thoughtfully. "Huh. Guess your little pets are better trained than I thought," he admitted grudgingly, but his words carried no sincerity, just another attempt to provoke her. Still, doesn't mean they're tough enough to handle real trouble. Sarah ignored him, continuing the training session as if the bikers weren't even there. She guided Titan and Echo through a series of complex maneuvers, demonstrating their speed, precision, and teamwork. Each command was executed flawlessly, showcasing the incredible bond she shared with her canine partners. Yet despite her efforts to maintain control, the constant interruptions made it difficult to concentrate. Every time she started a new exercise, one of the bikers would rev their engine or shout something obnoxious, deliberately breaking her rhythm. By the end of the day, Sarah was exhausted, not physically, but mentally. The relentless harassment was wearing her down, though she refused to let it show. As she packed up her gear and prepared to leave, Razor approached her again, this time with a smug grin plastered across his face. "You know, you're pretty good at ignoring us," he said, almost mockingly. "But how long can you keep that up? Sooner or later, those dogs are gonna crack." "They won't," Sarah replied confidently, meeting his gaze head-on. "Titan and Echo are stronger than you'll ever be, and so am I." Razor chuckled, shaking his head. "We'll see about that." With a casual wave, he turned and walked back to his bike, signaling for his gang to follow. As they sped off, leaving behind a trail of dust and noise, Sarah exhaled deeply, finally allowing herself a moment of relief. For now, the confrontation was over, but she knew it wouldn't last. The very next afternoon, the bikers returned, this time with a new tactic. This time they brought food, raw meat, bones, and scraps meant to tempt Titan and Echo away from Sarah. Razor parked his bike near the edge of the field and began tossing chunks of meat onto the ground, taunting the dogs with each throw. "Come on, boys," he shouted, grinning widely. "Don't tell me you're not hungry." To his surprise and frustration, the dogs didn't move. Titan and Echo stood perfectly still, their noses twitching slightly as they caught the scent of the food. But they didn't break formation. Sarah watched silently, her arms crossed as the bikers grew increasingly agitated. One of them even dismounted his bike and tried to lure Echo closer by waving a piece of steak in front of him. Echo stared at the man blankly, utterly uninterested, until Sarah gave a sharp whistle. The dog immediately turned his attention back to her, dismissing the biker completely. "You've got some weird tricks up your sleeve, lady," Razor muttered, clearly annoyed that his plan had failed, but he wasn't ready to give up yet. After a few minutes of futile attempts to bribe the dogs, he decided to escalate things further. He nodded to one of his gang members, a wiry man with tattoos covering his arms, and whispered something in his ear. The man grinned wickedly before climbing onto his bike and gunning the engine. Before Sarah could react, the biker sped straight toward Titan and Echo, swerving dangerously close to them. The dogs bristled, their hackles rising as they prepared to defend themselves. Sarah stepped forward quickly, placing herself between the biker and her dogs. "Stop!" she yelled, her voice filled with authority. "Get away from them!" The biker skidded to a halt just inches away from her, laughing as he revved the engine again. "What's wrong, princess? Afraid your precious pups can't handle a little excitement?" Sarah's heart pounded, but she kept her composure. She gave Titan and Echo a quick signal, instructing them to stand down. Both dogs obeyed, though their bodies remained tense, ready to spring into action if necessary. Razor watched the scene unfold, his expression shifting from amusement to something resembling admiration, or maybe disbelief. Either way, he wasn't finished testing her. Later that week, the tension reached its peak when Razor showed up during a public demonstration organized by Sarah's unit. The event was designed to showcase the capabilities of the K9 team to the local community, drawing a crowd of curious townsfolk eager to learn about the dog's skills. Sarah had been looking forward to the opportunity to highlight the hard work and dedication that went into training military dogs. What she hadn't anticipated was Razor crashing the event. As Sarah led Titan and Echo through a series of impressive exercises, tracking scents, navigating obstacles, and performing defensive maneuvers, Razor pushed his way to the front of the crowd, loudly questioning every move. "That all they can do?" he jeered, folding his arms across his chest. "Looks kinda basic to me." His comments drew murmurs from the audience, some of whom seemed unsure whether to take his side or defend Sarah. A few kids in the crowd giggled nervously, while others shot Razor dirty looks. Sarah ignored him, focusing instead on completing the demonstration with professionalism and grace. But when Razor challenged her outright, demanding proof that her dogs could handle real threats, she hesitated. She didn't want to engage with someone who clearly intended to belittle her, but she also recognized an opportunity to silence his mockery once and for all. With quiet confidence, Sarah accepted his challenge, but only under controlled conditions. "Fine," she said, fixing him with a steely glare. "But if my dogs prove you wrong, you owe them, and me, an apology." Razor smirked, clearly, confident that he'd win. "Deal," he said, extending a hand. Sarah shook it firmly, sealing the agreement. Little did he know, he was about to learn a lesson he wouldn't soon forget. The challenge was set to take place at an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town, a location chosen for its neutral ground and ample space. Word of the showdown spread quickly, drawing not only Razor and his gang, but also a curious crowd of locals who wanted to see how things would unfold. By the time Sarah arrived with Titan and Echo by her side, the atmosphere buzzed with anticipation. Some people whispered bets among themselves, while others simply watched with wide eyes, unsure of what to expect. Razor and his crew were already there when Sarah pulled up in her military-issued Jeep. They lounged against their motorcycles, exuding an air of cockiness that made Sarah's jaw tighten. Razor smirked as she stepped out of the vehicle, his arms crossed over his chest. "Glad you showed up," he said, his tone dripping with sarcasm. "Thought maybe you'd chicken out." Sarah didn't respond. Instead, she opened the back of the Jeep and helped Titan and Echo hop down. Both dogs stood tall and alert, their sleek coats catching the fading sunlight. She gave them a quick once-over, ensuring they were ready for whatever lay ahead. The crowd parted slightly as she walked toward the center of the makeshift arena, her posture radiating confidence despite the odds stacked against her. "All right," Razor announced loudly, addressing the gathering. "Let's see if these mutts are as tough as she says they are." He turned to Sarah, his grin widening. "I've got a few tests lined up. If your dogs can pass them all, I'll admit I was wrong, but if they fail—" He trailed off, letting the implication hang in the air. Sarah nodded curtly. "Fair enough. Let's get started." The first test was simple, or so Razor thought. He grabbed a bag of raw meat from one of his gang members and began tossing chunks onto the ground, scattering them around the area where Titan and Echo stood. The pungent smell of blood filled the air, tempting even the most disciplined of animals. Razor leaned back, crossing his arms as he waited for the dogs to give in to their instincts. "Come on, boys," he taunted. "You know you want it." But Titan and Echo didn't move. Their noses twitched slightly as they caught the scent, but they remained perfectly still, their eyes locked on Sarah. She gave them a subtle hand signal, reinforcing her command to stay focused. The crowd murmured in awe, impressed by the dogs' restraint. Razor scowled, clearly frustrated that his plan had failed. "Fine," he muttered. "Let's try something else." For the second test, Razor sent one of his men, a wiry guy named Spike, into the fray. Spike charged directly at Sarah, shouting loudly and waving his arms in an attempt to startle the dogs into attacking. The move was reckless and aggressive, designed to provoke fear rather than respect. Titan reacted instantly, leaping forward to intercept Spike before he could reach Sarah. In one fluid motion, Titan pinned the man to the ground, his powerful body holding Spike firmly in place without causing harm. The entire crowd gasped, some stepping back instinctively as they realized just how fast and precise the dog's movements were. Spike struggled briefly, but Titan's grip was firm, yet controlled. He wasn't hurting the man, merely preventing him from moving further. Sarah calmly walked over and called Titan off, signaling for him to return to her side. Spike scrambled to his feet, brushing himself off as he shot nervous glances at the dog. "That wasn't part of the plan," he stammered, retreating, back to the safety of the biker group. Razor's face darkened, but he wasn't ready to concede defeat. "Okay, fine," he growled. "Time for the real test." For this final challenge, he decided to step in personally. Grabbing a wooden bat from one of his gang members, he approached Sarah with a menacing glint in his eye. "Let's see how brave your dogs really are," he sneered, raising the bat as if preparing to strike. Titan and Echo tensed, their muscles coiled like springs. Sarah placed a reassuring hand on each of their heads, silently communicating that they should wait for her signal. When Razor swung the bat wildly at Titan, the dog dodged with lightning speed, avoiding the blow entirely. Before Razor could recover, Titan sprang forward, knocking the bat out of his hand with a swift paw swipe. The weapon clattered to the ground, leaving Razor stunned and off balance. Echo joined in next, positioning herself protectively in front of Sarah. Her low growl sent chills through the bikers, who suddenly looked less confident than before. Razor stumbled backward, his bravado crumbling under the weight of the situation. His gang exchanged uneasy glances, unsure of what to do next. Realizing they were losing control, Razor tried to rally his men. "Forget the dogs," he shouted. "We're leaving." But Sarah wasn't about to let them escape so easily. With a sharp whistle, she signaled Echo to herd the bikers back toward the center of the warehouse. The dog moved with remarkable agility, cutting off their escape routes and forcing them to stay put. One by one, the bikers froze, realizing they were trapped. Even Razor, who had always prided himself on being untouchable, found himself cornered with no way out. The crowd erupted into cheers, clapping and whistling as they watched the scene unfold. Sarah stepped forward, her expression calm but resolute. "You wanted proof," she said, addressing Razor directly. "Now you have it. My dogs aren't just trained, they're loyal, disciplined, and capable of handling anything thrown their way. And so am I." Razor stared at her, his arrogance replaced by something resembling shame. Slowly, he dropped to one knee, raising his hands in surrender. All right, he muttered, his voice barely audible. "You win. Your dogs are impressive." Sarah nodded, satisfied but not gloating. "Remember this moment," she said firmly. "Respect isn't given. It's earned. And mocking someone because of their gender or assuming they're weaker than you is never okay." As the bikers slunk away, humbled and defeated, the crowd surrounded Sarah, congratulating her on her victory. Parents lifted their children onto their shoulders to get a better look at Titan and Echo, marveling at the dog's strength and intelligence. Sarah knelt beside her partners, scratching behind their ears affectionately. "Good job, boys," she murmured, pride shining in her eyes. "You proved them all wrong." Though the confrontation was over, its impact lingered. The townsfolk spoke about it for days afterward, recounting how a woman and her 2 dogs had stood up to a group of rowdy bikers, and won. For Sarah, however, the experience reinforced something she'd always known. True strength comes not from intimidation or brute force, but from trust, teamwork, and unwavering determination. And with Titan and Echo by her side, she knew she could face anything life threw her way. The showdown at the abandoned warehouse had reached its climax, and the air was thick with tension. Razor and his gang were visibly shaken, their earlier bravado crumbling under the weight of Titan and Echo's precision and power. Sarah stood tall, her confidence unshaken as she watched the bikers struggle to regain control of the situation. But this wasn't just about proving a point anymore. It was about teaching a lesson that would stick. Razor, now backed into a corner by Echo's relentless herding tactics, looked around frantically for an escape route. His men, equally trapped, muttered among themselves, their voices laced with panic. One of them tried to bolt toward the exit, but Echo intercepted him with a swift, calculated movement, cutting him off before he could take more than 2 steps. The biker froze in place, his hands raised defensively as he realized there was no way out without risking injury, or worse. All right, Razor shouted, throwing up his hands in surrender. "We get it, you win." His voice cracked slightly, betraying the fear simmering beneath his tough exterior. For someone who prided himself on being untouchable, this moment of vulnerability felt foreign and humiliating. Sarah stepped forward, her boots crunching softly against the dusty floor of the warehouse. She stopped a few feet away from Razor, her expression calm but firm. "Winning isn't the point here," she said, her voice carrying across the silent space. "The point is respect. You came here mocking me, doubting my abilities, and disrespecting my dogs because you thought we weren't strong enough. Now, you see what happens when you underestimate someone." Her words struck a nerve, not just with Razor but with his entire gang. They glanced at each other uneasily, their usual arrogance replaced by shame. Even the crowd that had gathered to watch began murmuring among themselves, some nodding in agreement while others simply stared in awe at the scene unfolding before them. Titan and Echo remained vigilant, standing protectively beside Sarah. Their bodies were tense, ready to act if needed, but they didn't make a sound. It was as if they understood the gravity of the moment, that this wasn't just another training exercise or demonstration, it was something bigger. They had proven themselves, not only as skilled working dogs but as partners worthy of admiration and trust. Razor swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing nervously. "Look," he started, his tone softer than before. I didn't think." He trailed off, struggling to find the right words. Finally, he sighed and dropped to one knee, bowing his head slightly. "You're right. We messed up, and I'm sorry for all of it." The apology caught everyone off guard, including Sarah. She hadn't expected Razor to admit fault so openly, let alone apologize. For a moment, she simply stared at him, weighing his sincerity. Then, after a long pause, she nodded. "Apology accepted," she said evenly. "But remember this. Respect is earned through actions, not words. If you truly mean what you're saying, show it moving forward." Razor nodded vigorously, glancing back at his gang for support. To his credit, they seemed to share his newfound humility. One by one, they lowered their heads in acknowledgement, silently agreeing to leave Sarah and her dogs alone from that day forward. The tension in the room eased slightly, though the memory of what had just transpired lingered heavily in the air. As the bikers slowly made their way out of the warehouse, the crowd erupted into applause. People clapped and cheered, congratulating Sarah on her victory. Some even approached her afterward, eager to meet Titan and Echo and thank her for standing up to Razor and his gang. Parents held their children close, pointing to the dogs and explaining how teamwork, discipline, and courage could overcome even the toughest challenges. Despite the attention, Sarah kept her focus on her canine companions. She knelt down beside Titan and Echo, running her hands over their sleek coats and speaking to them in soft tones. "You did amazing today," she told them, her voice filled with pride. "Thank you for having my back." Both dogs wagged their tails gently, leaning into her touch as if to say, "We'll always have your back." Later that evening, as Sarah drove back to the base with Titan and Echo resting quietly in the back seat, she reflected on everything that had happened. While the confrontation with the bikers had been intense and admittedly stressful, it had also reminded her of why she loved her job so much. Every day she worked alongside incredible animals, who trusted her implicitly, and together they accomplished feats most people couldn't imagine. There was a unique bond between handler and dog, one built on mutual respect and understanding. That bond had carried them through today's challenge, and it would carry them through whatever came next. Back at the base, Sarah spent some time debriefing with her commanding officer, recounting the events of the day in detail. Her superior listened intently, occasionally nodding in approval. When she finished, he smiled warmly. "You handled that situation perfectly," he said. "Not only did you defend yourself and your dogs, but you turned it into an opportunity to educate those men. That takes real leadership." Sarah shrugged modestly, brushing off the compliment. "It wasn't just me," she replied. "Titan and Echo did all the heavy lifting. Without them, none of this would have been possible." Her commanding officer chuckled. "True, but don't sell yourself short. You trained them, guided them, and led them through every step of the way. That says a lot about your character." After the debrief, Sarah took Titan and Echo for a quiet walk around the base. The sun was setting, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink. As they strolled along the fence line, Sarah felt a deep sense of gratitude for her dogs, for her team, and for the life she'd built despite the challenges she faced. She knew there would be more obstacles ahead, more people who doubted her abilities simply because she was a woman. But moments like this, the ones where she proved herself and inspired others, made every struggle worth it. By the time they returned to their quarters, night had fallen, casting a peaceful stillness over the base. Sarah prepared dinner for herself and gave Titan and Echo their well-deserved meals. As they ate, she sat nearby, watching them with a content smile. Today had been a victory, not just for her, but for anyone who had ever been underestimated or dismissed because of stereotypes or preconceived notions. The next morning, as Sarah geared up for another day of training, she noticed something different. A group of soldiers who had previously kept their distance now greeted her warmly, offering words of encouragement and praise. Even the townsfolk treated her differently, tipping their hats or waving hello as she passed by. Razor and his gang, true to their word, stayed far away, keeping to the outskirts of town and avoiding any further trouble. Though life returned to its usual rhythm, the impact of that day remained. Sarah had shown not only Razor but everyone else that strength comes in many forms, and sometimes the quietest person in the room is the one you should never underestimate. With Titan and Echo by her side, she continued to break barriers, inspire others, and prove that resilience, loyalty, and determination can conquer even the toughest adversaries. And somewhere deep inside, she hoped that Razor and his gang had learned a lesson they wouldn't soon forget, one that would stay with them long after the dust from the warehouse had settled. In the days following the showdown at the abandoned warehouse, the small town buzzed with talk of Sarah and her dogs. The story spread like wildfire, how a lone female canine handler had stood up to Razor and his gang, proving not only her own strength, but also the unmatched skill and loyalty of Titan and Echo. People who had once doubted her now spoke about her with admiration, their skepticism replaced by respect. Even those who hadn't witnessed the event firsthand felt its ripple effect, as tales of the confrontation filtered through conversations at local diners, gas stations, and community gatherings. For Razor and his crew, things were different too. They didn't show their faces in town for several days after the incident, retreating to their usual hangouts on the outskirts where they could avoid prying eyes. But when they finally did reappear, there was a noticeable change in their behavior. Gone was the swaggering arrogance that had once defined them. Instead, they moved quietly, keeping to themselves and steering clear of trouble. Some townsfolk whispered that they'd never seen Razor look so humbled or so reflective. It wasn't long before Razor sought Sarah out again, though this time, his approach couldn't have been more different. One afternoon, as Sarah practiced, tracking drills with Titan and Echo near the edge of the forest, she spotted him walking toward her from a distance. At first, her instincts told her to stay alert. After all, trust wasn't something she gave easily. But as he drew closer, she noticed the absence of his usual sneer. His hands were shoved deep into the pockets of his leather jacket, and his shoulders slumped slightly as if carrying an invisible weight. "Lieutenant Callahan," he began hesitantly, stopping a few feet away. His voice lacked the mocking tone she'd grown accustomed to, replaced by something softer, almost vulnerable. Can I talk to you for a minute?" Sarah studied him carefully, her expression unreadable. After a brief pause, she nodded. "Go ahead." Razor shifted, uncomfortably glancing down at his boots before meeting her gaze. "I just wanted to say, well, I already said it before, but I need to say it again. I'm sorry for everything. For doubting you, for messing with your training sessions, for being such a jerk. None of us realized how good you and your dogs really are, and we definitely didn't mean to disrespect you or what you do." He paused, running a hand over his scruffy beard as if searching for the right words. "Truth is, I've always thought toughness meant acting tough, like throwing my weight around or talking big. Seeing you handle those situations without losing your cool, it made me realize I was wrong. Real strength isn't about intimidation or showing off. It's about discipline, patience, and knowing when to stand your ground. You taught me that, and I won't forget it." Sarah listened silently, her arms crossed loosely over her chest. When Razor finished speaking, she took a deep breath, considering his apology. Finally, she nodded slowly. "Thank you for saying that," she replied, her tone measured but sincere. "Apologies mean nothing unless they're backed by action. If you truly mean what you're saying, then prove it, not just to me, but to everyone else in this town." Razor nodded earnestly. "I will. I promise." He glanced at Titan and Echo, who were watching him intently, their ears perked up and tails still. "And I swear, we'll leave you and your dogs alone from now on. No more interruptions, no more games. You've got my word." With that, he turned and walked away, leaving Sarah to process the unexpected encounter. As she watched him disappear down the trail, she felt a mix of emotions: relief, satisfaction, and even a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, Razor and his gang would turn over a new leaf. Whether or not they actually followed through remained to be seen, but for now, she chose to believe that people could change, if they were willing to learn. The weeks that followed brought subtle yet meaningful changes to the town. Razor and his crew kept their distance, sticking to quieter activities and avoiding any behavior that might draw attention. Occasionally, Sarah would catch glimpses of them helping clean up litter along the roadside or assisting stranded motorists, a stark contrast to their earlier antics. While some residents remained skeptical, others began to acknowledge the shift. crediting Sarah's actions for sparking a positive transformation. Meanwhile, Sarah continued her work with Titan and Echo, pouring her energy into honing their skills and strengthening their bond. Their reputation grew beyond the confines of the small town, earning recognition from military units across the region. Requests for demonstrations and training workshops poured in, giving Sarah opportunities to showcase the incredible capabilities of K9 teams while inspiring others to pursue careers in the field. During one such demonstration, held in a nearby city, a young girl approached Sarah after the event, her eyes wide with wonder. Clutching a stuffed dog toy tightly to her chest, she asked, "Are you scared sometimes? Like when bad people try to hurt you?" Sarah knelt down to meet the girl's gaze, smiling warmly. "Sometimes, yes," she admitted, "but fear doesn't control me. My dogs and I train hard every day, so we're ready for anything. And when you know someone has your back, whether it's a person or a dog, you can face anything together." The girl nodded thoughtfully, hugging her toy closer. "I want to be like you when I grow up," she declared, her voice filled with determination. Sarah chuckled softly, ruffling the girl's hair. "You can be anything you set your mind to," she encouraged. "Just remember, it's not about being fearless. It's about being brave enough to keep going, even when you're scared." As months passed, Sarah reflected on how much had changed since her initial encounter with Razor and his gang. What had started as a series of taunts and disruptions had evolved into a powerful lesson, not just for Razor, but for herself and the entire community. She had proven that strength wasn't defined by gender or size, but by resilience, teamwork, and an unwavering commitment to doing what was right. Titan and Echo remained her steadfast companions, their loyalty unwavering no matter the challenge. Together, the trio tackled increasingly complex missions, earning accolades and respect wherever they went. Yet amidst all the achievements and accolades, Sarah never lost sight of why she loved her job so much. It wasn't about fame or recognition, it was about making a difference, one step, one command, and one moment at a time. On quiet evenings, as the sun dipped below the horizon and painted the sky in hues of gold and crimson, Sarah often found herself sitting outside with Titan and Echo by her side. She'd watch them playfully chase each other or simply lie contentedly in the grass, their presence a constant reminder of the unbreakable bond they shared. In those moments, she felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude, not just for her dogs, but for the journey that had led her here. Life wasn't perfect, of course. There would always be challenges, skeptics, and moments of doubt. But Sarah faced them head-on, drawing strength from the lessons she'd learned and the support of those around her. With Titan and Echo by her side, she knew she could overcome anything and inspire others to do the same. And so, Lieutenant Sarah Ace Callahan continued her mission, not just as a soldier or a handler, but as a symbol of courage, resilience, and the power of trust. Her story became a beacon of hope for anyone who dared to defy expectations, proving that true strength lies not in dominance, but in unity, compassion, and the unwavering belief that even the toughest adversaries can be met with grace and dignity.